think everybody knows me by now. I'm Jan van Wijk, developer of the DFSee utility. Last time I presented something on DFSee was 2019, and I think that was version 15 or so. Today I'll tell something about the latest version. There is one major change in there that we'll come to later. Otherwise it's actually more of a minor release, so just a few bug fixes and just minor changes. Today I'll just go over the functionality of DFSee briefly, because I've presented that over and over again over the last couple of years, so most of you probably are familiar with it. If you got any questions, just put them up, otherwise I'll just go pretty quick through the material. And then I want to show you something about the version 17, do an automatic update if that works with the network here, because I think since version 15 or so it's possible to update the DFSee to the latest versions from within the program itself. So it's sort of automatic update. And I'll try to do that in the OS2 version that runs in a virtual machine on this laptop. And maybe on a Linux USB stick, bootable stick. Okay. Very briefly who I am. I started as a software engineer, did a lot of things over the last 30 odd years. 28 of those I developed the DFSee. In the beginning partly as part of my work, because I needed something like that, and later on as a product after I founded my own one-man company, which I did somewhere early 2001, I think. At the moment I'm actually working toward retirement, more or less. I spend maybe half a day or a day in the week working on DFSee, doing support and other things. And the rest of the time I do a lot of nature photography, playing guitar and lots of other interesting stuff that has nothing to do with programming or OS2 whatsoever. Okay, what is DFSee? It's a disk utility implementing a lot of the stuff that people are familiar with, like fdisk, or for OS2 LVM, things like partition magic, stuff like that. It's used to prepare disks, create partitions, but also a lot to solve problems with those after installing other operating systems or making mistakes or whatever. One of the interesting features implemented in version 15 or 16, I think, is browsing, meaning that you can actually use DFSee to access files with a GUI that looks a lot like a file manager without needing an operating system that actually understands the file system, because the understanding of the file system and how to find files and stuff in there is in DFSee. So I could, for instance, copy files on a Windows system that come from a Linux disk where there's no Windows driver available, or the other way around, or get files from a disk that is damaged to a point that the operating system will not mount it, but then usually DFSee will still be able to copy most of the files from there.
Can you browse a Windows drive that is encrypted?
No, not from another operating system.
Okay.
Because DFSee doesn't know about encryption, so the underlying layer, so the raw reading of the disk, should know about the encryption, and that's pretty difficult to do. Unless the encryption is on a BIOS or other firmware level.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll probably show some of that later, because there's also a Linux partition on it with Ubuntu installed, so I can browse some files in the file system from Windows later. You can also use backup and restore stuff and analysis procedures and stuff like that, which are often used in support if people have problems and I can't answer them directly. Usually I ask for information files created by DFSee, so it will do an analysis of the disk, of partitions, stuff like that, into human readable log files, which are then sent to me for analysis, and well, often that helps me to analyze the problem, get a solution. Okay, maintaining partitions, of course, F-disk-like stuff. Imaging, that's sort of a backup restore thing, but then on a disk sector level, so you can make backups of whole partitions into files, and then later restore that file to a partition of the same size. It's very similar to cloning, which you can also do, so copy a whole partition sector by sector to a similar partition on another disk. But in this case it goes to file or back. It's the files you can use for backup to recover if you make mistakes with the contents of the partition. Doesn't want to go further. What is that? Cloning. Okay, there we go. I mentioned cloning. Cloning is copying directly from one area of the disk to another, or from an area on the disk to an area on another disk. You can use that to quickly make safety copies or backups or whatever. Oh, I went the wrong way. Well, anyway, I won't go the wrong way. There we go. File recovery. That's one of the things I mentioned. You can use a browser for that. That's a file manager like utility or user interface in DFSee. Before that existed, you could also do the same functionality, but you had to know a lot of low-level commands to do the same thing. And it's actually, the basic functionality is just copy a file from one place, from a file system that DFSee can access, and copy it to somewhere else, a file system that is live on your own system. So you could copy a file from an ext4 file system on OS2 and copy that to an HPFS or JFS partition and then do something with it. This is the browser functionality, so you can just go into DFSee and then open a partition with a file system, then look at that partition as if it were a directory browser, and select files or select directories, just dig in. I'll show it later. It looks a little bit like a file manager like FC2 or North Commander or whatever. Things you can do within that is copy files, but also view them in as text files or as binary files. It has a built-in hex editor, which is mentioned here, binary editor and viewer. It's used in several places. This is from the browser, where you can act on files that you are looking at, but you can use the same binary editor also to edit partition tables or boot sectors or whatever. For DFSee, anything that looks at if it's a partition or a disk or whatever, it's basically just a large collection of sectors. The sectors is a unit, usually 512 bytes, or could be larger. And reading and writing those sectors is done at the lowest level, so DFSee interfaces with the operating system on the level of get me sector such and such from that device. So that's how it operates, meaning that if you want to use DFSee, you have to have a driver in your operating system that is able to access that device. That's not built into DFSee, so anything the operating system can see on the basic level can be accessed by DFSee, and then it will interpret the file system that's on there. You don't need the operating system for that, but you do need it to access raw sectors. Come in. A little bit of an overview. overview. You got the program itself here, and it can use scripts and stuff, and it can create files, can do logging, can create analysis files, and it works on all of those stuff here below, file systems. It could be on any. Well, it's not particularly interesting, I guess, but DFSee uses a few sets of things called stores, and you associate a store with a specific area on a disk or an area on whatever device you're working with, and it can be the whole disk or it can be a partition. And things like cloning just operate on two stores. You associate one of the stores with the source thing you're working with, and another with the destination, and then you say, okay, clone, and the default clone will be go from store 1 to store 2 or something. But that's normally invisible for the end user. DFSee is available for 5 operating systems at the moment. There's a DOS version, an OS2 version, which I started out with, but also a Linux version, a Windows version, and Mac OS. It's text-based, command line, but since a long time it has kind of a text-based user interface. So the operating it works a lot like familiar GUI programs. Like actually, internally it looks a lot like PM programming if you look at the GUI code that's in there, or the user interface code. Scripting is also important. Almost anything in DFSee is executed by doing commands. Even the things from the menu will eventually invoke a command to do their work. And you can put those commands in a text file and actually use a scripting language to do interesting stuff with it. If you look at scripts, for instance, that come with DFSee, like updating a USB stick or something, you'll see some pretty powerful operations being done. Just a brief overview. I started in 1994 because I was in a project where we had OS2 for a large bank, and OS2 came with a new file system, HPFS, that as soon as there was a problem, you were lost because there was nothing to dig into that file system. There was a lot of stuff like Norton utilities for file systems and stuff like that, but not to create HPFS, and that's why I created a viewer to look at low-level structures in HPFS, and that was the start of DFSee. And over the years, I did a lot of changes and additional functionality, made it more generic, more operating systems, more file systems. And right now we came to version 17 in 2022. And the major change, which we'll see here, is that it will become open source eventually. And 17 is actually the first version that you can run without any registration, so no key required anymore. The beginning of the browser. You can also access file systems in compressed images. DFSee can create compressed images, so in a single file from a partition or so. And you can actually use the browser to get into that image file and extract files from it. Okay, version 15, lots of new stuff. Oh, let's go back a little bit. One of the new things in 15 and enhanced in 16 is a Linux-based bootable USB stick called Puppy, and in version 16 that was upgraded to a 64-bit version with a reasonably new version of Linux, so it works on a lot of systems. And actually this 64-bit one works on the EFI systems as well. I can actually boot my Lenovo laptop from that. Let's go the other way. There we go. 17, okay. The major change is, of course, it's open source, or it will become open source. At this moment are not released yet. But, the binaries are already free. All registration stuff has been taken out. There won't be any more big changes. At least that's what I think now. But I more or less stopped developing DFSee last year. And at the moment I do bug fixing, do support, email support, stuff like that. As it always has been, support is on a best effort basis. I do a lot of other things beside this. When I'm stuck in Africa somewhere for a couple of weeks, then well, there won't be any email support. Which happened just a couple of weeks ago. I think I was 8 days out in the bush without any connectivity, so I was completely off the radar. Which is a nice experience, by the way. And in some form I will make the source code available sometime next year. I'm not sure how. I'll probably leave it up to someone else to pick it up and put it in GitHub or whatever. DFSee has been developed over the years using first IBM compilers and later OpenWorkton. And it uses GCC or a successor of GCC on the Mac platform. But I don't use any versioning system because I've been developing it on my own all those years, and I never really felt the need to make it fully versioned. So if someone picks it up, that's one of the first things they have to do. Put it into a good versioning system like Git or whatever. This is a desktop from DFSee. This is if you boot the Puppy Linux stick, so you get a Linux desktop. And there's a DFSee running here, but you got several things to start here. Run DFSee or create, open an image or whatever. There's also there's a browser on there, and there's a file system manager and stuff like that. It's pretty generic. It runs on many systems. If you've got an older system that cannot run 64-bit, there's also a 32-bit version available, but that will only run on older systems, not on UEFI. If we have time, I'll boot my laptop from this stick later. It should work. Questions on this so far?
I'm
Yes.
curious on the Mac, you didn't use C-Lang?
Sorry?
You didn't use the C-Lang compiler?
Yeah, C-Lang with
Or you
the
did?
associated tools. Yeah,
Oh,
it's
okay.
it's the standard compiler that's in the Xcode development environment.
Yeah.
On the Mac. Yeah. On each new release of macOS, it spits out new warnings, so I have to just update my make files and my code just to make it compile, even if nothing changes, because the compilers get more critical every round. Okay, then we're running on Windows here.
Have you choose any open source license yet for?
Not really, but it's probably going to be version 3 of the standard open source stuff.
Yeah, GPL.
Yeah, GPL version 3. Yeah. Actually, the part of the product already is open source.
Okay.
The whole user interface stuff is called TX Library, which I developed for DFSee, and it's been open source since 2 years, I think, and that's also GPL.
Okay.
Probably do the same for DFSee.
Okay, great.
I don't want to put any restrictions really on what's going to happen with it. So. Okay, any more questions? Okay, I'll just show something in DFSee.
There is another question on the chat.
Okay.
Some years ago, you said that you were going to experiment with Qt to try
Yes.
to use.
I have done some experiments with Qt, Qt, I should say, I think. It's a very nice environment, but I didn't really go forward with it for DFC. Because just porting what is there now to a Qt environment doesn't really bring any new functionality, just a new way of working, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So, yes?
Any chance that you could consider implementing support for the accessing disks under Arca OS with the new GPT filter interface? Because there's, if you now
Maybe,
run
yeah.
DFSee on OS,
Yeah, that would be a possibility, I guess.
if you now start with DFC on an Arca OS system with GPT, you only get to see the, fake volumes. You don't see the full GPT disk because it's not aware of that this GPT interface exists. And I don't know if it's possible. I think you can do raw sector I/O via the filter driver.
Probably.
And I don't know how much
Yeah.
work it would be, but if
I
that
have no
would be
idea.
integrated, that means that from DFC you can image your entire GPT disk and suck it up.
Yeah, we can always discuss that. The fact that it's going open source doesn't mean I won't do anything myself.
I know
It's
that.
just that it's available for others as well. So.
I would love to have that feature.
Yes,
Because
understand.
as time permits, I will simply be dumping NBR disk and switching to GPT because my personal experience is that installing multiple OSs next to each other with GPT, for me personally, is a whole lot more robust. You know, all the pitfalls with NBR and some things that you can run into. So having DFC being able to image an entire disk would be great for
Sure.
GPT.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. We're running on Windows 10 here, so I'll just switch to the Windows version that I started already. We see the, whoops, that wasn't intended.
Mhm.
That's Arc OS running. Bah.
Will it work in a VM?
Sorry?
Can it work in a VM?
Yeah, DFC is just an application, so it runs in a VM just like any other application.
Well, I was wondering, since it does that low-level stuff, opening disk stuff for.
Yeah, well, it's
What
low
happens?
it's low level as far as DFC is concerned.
Mhm.
So it goes to the operating system it's running in. So if you're running Arca OS on Linux or on Windows, it goes to Arca OS and ask for a sector, and then Arca OS will go to the disk it thinks, but that's emulated by the virtual machine. So
That's right, okay, yeah.
we'll see that in a moment. Because right here, because this is the Windows version, what we see is the, I'll have to move it a little bit. Not sure why it's, what you see here is the actual physical disk that's in there. It's an SSD, and it came with Windows 10 preloaded. But I also put a Linux version on there in this ext4 partition, and it has a swap. And there's also an extended FAT partition that has my virtual machine images, so I can access them from both Linux and Windows. And I think this NTFS is the Windows restore partition. And it's a GPT partitioning style, so it's not MBR based. Now this is Windows. Let me show you something else first. One of the things I mentioned is that you can do updates. So if we're in program updates and downloads, you can do several things. You can get image files for to create USB sticks, bootable USB sticks, but you can also get updates and install them. If you do the get here, it will install them automatically. But if you can also get a DFC installation file and put it on there manually. If the program is not able to download, you could always put it on there with a USB stick or download it on another system, whatever, and then install it. But you can do it in one go, and I think I'm on the Wi-Fi at the moment, so it should be able to get the update. It'll take a little while. I have to scroll because the screen is in a lower resolution than normally. Normally you would have it visible already, but it shows here that the current DFC that's running is 17, and it could update now. So this comes from the website, the DFC.com website, and it says that you can upgrade to this version, which is the same version, so it doesn't make any sense at this point. But I think we'll see in the running ArcOS in a minute. I think that has an older version, so we could try to do the upgrade live there. It should work. So I'll just cancel this, but this is how you can update the program automatically from within the menu, and this works on Windows, on Linux, and on OS2, as long as you got the wget utility present. Another thing I'd like to show is the browser. Let's use the menu for that. So browse a file system, directories and files. You can quickly access that with the F9 key, but I'll just do it from the menu here. And it will ask me what partition I want to view. I'll go to the ext4 partition, which is where Ubuntu is installed. And then it asks me where do you want to start browsing, and I'll start from the root. And this will take a while, so just what it's doing now is it's building a table in memory for all the files it finds on the file system, so you can later quickly access the information for those files. So that when you're browsing, that you don't need to go to the disk all the time. So this takes a little while, about a minute I think. And when this finishes, it will come up with a user interface that looks a lot like a file manager. And you can browse through that, go to parent directories, go to subdirectories, go to files. You can mark files, you can mark several files and then do an action on all of them, like mark 3 or 4 files, and then copy all of them to some recovery directory. Nearly there. Okay, now we see the root of this Linux file system. So we see if you know Linux a little bit, you recognize the directories we have on there. Let's see, let's go to user stuff. No, that's not the one. Not the one I grabbed. I'm in home. Only one home directory for myself. And there's some stuff on there, like pictures, a wallpaper directory. So if you go into this file, let's see if we can get the options. Oops, that's not the right one. Okay, now I marked a whole lot of files, so it doesn't really matter. Let's go, see what we can do. Okay, this with the mouse I now marked 10 files or so, and those are the actions you could perform on those. You could, for instance, copy them to another file. If I do enter, it will do that, and what it will now do is get me a file dialog, and then you can select a destination. You can create new directories if you want. By default, it goes to some DFC directory, which is not really what I would do. It's actually the install directory, I guess. So let's go somewhere else. See if there's some temporary directory. That's me. Let's probably let's make some temporary. directory there called recover. Say okay. So now it's recovering or copying those files to the directory and it's handled those. So unmark it. Or do something else with it. Let's say. If you got a single file marked, there's more you should be able to do. Like editing. So now you're looking at the file, and this is a JPEG file made by me probably with a camera or some other program, I don't know. So those are the things you can do with the browser. If we now, let's do some more navigation.
So Jan, you
Yeah.
sit down, so you're in Windows, and you're reading files off the
Yeah.
DFSee4 file system. You said earlier that it actually doesn't read the files. It's actually using an operating system to read the files, or in what context is it not? How are you able to read the, how are you able to read
Well,
the
the files you see listed here and the ones I copied elsewhere, those are all interpreted and accessed by DFSee. So at the lowest level, the operating system only knows about sectors. So I analyze the directory structures, the file system structures, and know, okay, this is the file name, and if I want to have the data, they're located in those and those sectors, and then I copy them. The other side, where you copy them to, are just normal operating system file I/O. So just open a directory, open a file, write, binary write. So for the source part where the files come from, it's low level, so everything is handled by DFSee. Writing them is handled by the operating system.
And you only support certain file systems.
Sorry?
You only support certain file systems, right?
I'm not sure what the count is, but I think about 10 or so. 10 different file systems, something like that.
I mean, did you have to understand enough to do this to write like an XTFS4 driver for OS2, for example? I mean, this is not so tricky.
Well, I know a lot about how to do it, but I know a lot about the disk structures behind it. I don't know a lot about multitasking, writing OS2 file system drivers.
Right.
So
Okay.
I wouldn't be able to do it quickly myself, but I would be quite supportive for someone who would want to write one. Someone who knows how to write file system drivers, which there are not many around
Right.
anymore, I guess. But yeah, I have part of the knowledge, the file system internal stuff,
Uh-huh.
but not really the OS2 internal stuff, how you write a file system driver, because that's...
Yeah. Does anybody, is that documented? Is there like a bullet?
Yeah, there's...
NetDrive.
yeah.
You could write a NetDrive.
There's an SDK, file system driver.
SDK.
It's part of the toolkit.
Uh-huh.
But like all of the stuff in the toolkit, it's not documented at a programmer-friendly way.
And it's
Usually.
outdated to some extent.
Mm.
Yeah. And there used to be an NTFS driver for OS2, but I've noticed
Yeah.
it's not there anymore. What, is that because it's not reliable or something?
That's because it has a lot of limitations. It's written for the first version of NTFS, and it has severe limitations if you access large NTFS file systems with it. I think over 4 gigabyte or something. It can cause data corruption, so it's not recommended.
There is actually an NTFS NetDrive plugin,
Yeah,
which I think is
true.
more current.
That's much more current.
If you're looking at putting a stick of dynamite in your system, we shipped that drive for a really full station at the time, but later we reverted it out. To give you one example, if an NTFS drive would be in the system and the driver's loaded, and you would then run Lotus Smart Suite installed, you would just get a kernel crash. So
Let's get to dynamite.
yeah. But I think there's still at BNT micro boards in the Arcanoa web shop. I think there is somewhere an NT boards on hops. There's an NTFS driver plugin for NetDrive itself. And I think that works relatively stable.
It's on Hobbs. If you go to the NetDrive product page on the ARC-OA page, we link to it on Hobbs.
And does NetDrive, is that something you still have to purchase?
A full license of NetDrive, yes.
Yeah.
NetDrive is free to use if you're only using it for Samba.
Okay. But you couldn't install one of these things that we were just discussing in the version that's.
You could, yeah, in the binary is exactly the same. You could do it, but
You shouldn't.
legally, you're supposed to get a license.
Okay.
Okay, let's continue. I just went up a few directories, so we're actually looking now at the install directory where DFSee was installed for this system, and you'll find some history stuff, so all of the stuff that comes with DFSee. Let's look at the bin is actually the OS2 directory. Let's have a look at that. There should be a DFS OS2 one in there, I guess. There it is. This is the icon, which you can have a look at. That's what an icon looks like.
Nice.
Or the executable. Now it's actually showing that as text because there's a lot of text in the header area, and by default, DFSee will scan the first sector, and if it sees that it's more than 30% ASCII, it will display it as text. But you can also switch to assembly or hex. So you see the normal header MZ header looking executable. Okay, just a quick demonstration. Now if you go out of the browser, you'll see that it has logged what we did into the log file as well. So later on you can always look back at what exactly you did, which files were changed and which files were copied and stuff like that. Okay, so that's the browser. Questions?
I have a usage tip.
Sorry?
I have a usage tip for everyone.
Yeah, okay.
The file browser
Yeah.
is extremely useful, and Joe, you'll follow along with me with this. Clients give us sticks with QuickBooks data on them. And obviously partitioned removable media needs to have LVM on it for OS
Yeah.
to recognize it,
Yeah.
even if it
Oh,
knows the
yeah.
file system.
If they're not on there, you can still access them.
And that's what I do, instead of trying to monkey with the client's stick and then perhaps break it myself.
Yeah.
Assuming the stick actually has the data on it that the client says. it
Yeah,
does.
actually we should be able to do that right here if we.
It's very handy to do that.
Just copy the files over.
Yeah,
Use
just,
DFSee.
yeah, exactly.
Let's open another partition. This is a bootable USB stick, which is Linux, but actually if you look at the file system that's on there, it's just a fat file system, and it has the whole Linux system in
Mhm.
compressed files. So, which is, oh, why do I only see one disk? Because it wasn't plugged in properly, I guess. Not sure why I'm not seeing it. Oh, I know why. Because I started DFSee before I plugged in the stick. Let's start it again.
There's no refresh to bring up the thing you just plugged in.
Sorry?
There's no refresh, so you.
Yeah, there's a way to do it, but I forgot exactly what to do, so I'll just restart it. But there's a possibility. There's a thing you can do to rescan all the disks. Right now it's there, you see. It's the one here below. This one. So this is the second disk, and this is an MBR disk, and it has a primary FAT32 file system on it. It's called DFS Puppy 64 Bionic, which was the Linux version that was on there. And let's browse that. Now FAT it's a lot faster, as you can see. Also because the partition is smaller, but those are all the files that are on a bootable stick. It's very simple. Well, there's even a key on there, even when it's not needed anymore, but the whole build process and the packaging process I use still creates keys, so that's something I still have to take out for version 17.1. But on the current distribution, it still ships with the default key. And it has it has a standard Linux distribution in there that was tuned by someone to create a usable desktop with a browser and everything you would want to need. And I customized that, and it puts all the customization in a single file, which is, there it is. This is the save file, and it has the DFSee customization in it. And each time you boot it and you use it, if you don't change anything on the stick itself, you can just shut down and be left with it. But you can also change things in your desktop or install all the software or whatever. And then if on shutdown you choose for save, then it will save it to that file. So I could, if I wanted to copy this key, for instance, I could copy it elsewhere. Same as we did before. Copy or recover. There we go. And it's probably, yeah, I'll have to do the same thing there, but I could copy it to this directory. If I wanted to. Okay, then I'll do a shutdown of Windows and see if we can boot the stick. Or actually, I'll do it differently. I'll boot the Ubuntu, which is on there. Why doesn't it stop? There we go. Oh, this is also interesting, I guess. This is ArcOS running, the original 5.0, I think, because it was installed a couple of years ago. And I think I installed DFSee in there, or we can demo it in here as well. DFSee folder, and let's just start this one. Okay, this is the OS2 version. See DFSee OS2 version 16.7. It's 2 years old. And let's see if we can update that to version 17. It should work. Oops. Go to downloads. Latest stable update. Okay. Standard, it goes to my dfsee.com website and it will get the zip file, but it's okay, I'm on OS2, maybe you'd like to get the WPI file instead installed from that, so I'll do that. And it should show me, let's scroll up a little bit, that we are currently on 16.7. And we can go to 17.0, which we will do. And it actually should, there it is. Download to download directory. There's an older one in there already. I'm not sure how old it is, but we'll just overwrite it there. So now it should start wget. It's probably because the network is pretty slow.
Yeah.
If it's taken too long, we'll just reboot in a moment. If it does work, what will happen after this, it will execute the installer, so the WPI installer, original one, okay. This is somewhat important because if you install it, some files may be locked, so it cannot overwrite the executable, so you have to quit DFSee. Which we will do. No, it doesn't automatically, I guess. So it automatically started warping, takes a little while. Next, I agree. Whoops, no, that's my mistake. I always make the same mistake with installing. Let's see if it went correctly, because I think normally it would be 4 packages. But anyway, hopefully, I have all of them. This should be the new version. No, then I missed a package, I think. I think I unselected one of the packages to install. Go to scripts. Install program update. Should find the one. No, this is the generic one. That's not really helpful. So. Okay. We'll just do it again then. Make sure I don't check anything when installing. The same mechanism works for the other operating systems. So I usually do my bootable USB sticks this way. Oh, now we actually see it download. Let's see how long that's going to take. Okay, can wait for that. So from the VM, it's now using the internet connection that my Windows got. It's not very fast. Okay, let's see if it worked correctly this time. Next. Okay. Well, should be updated now. There we see version 17 now running. Okay, any questions on that? Because I think we're about time. No questions? Okay.
Well, thank you.
Thank you all for listening.